Does INEC really, as an independent agency, require the National Assembly or the NCC before they can transmit results live?
Thanks for that important question. And I think first, the conversations on electronic transmission of results has over time taken more of a legal perspective, in the sense that the major challenge had always been that if the Electoral Act does not enable INEC to transmit results, then if INEC does that, if any party or candidate or individual goes to court to challenge the elections results, relying on INEC's data from their database, for instance, and then when you in court, the court would always consider the manual process, which is what the law recognizes at the moment, to supersede the electronic process, which was an introduction of INEC's guidelines. And this is what we've had. Why this became a debated issue was because a lot of groups have been advocating that the Electoral Act should recognize, or rather give INEC the power to electronically transmit results, just so that it is not regarded as an INEC policy, but a matter of, but rather a matter of law. And that if INEC fails to do it electronically, can even challenge INEC for failing to do so because the law is clear on it. And INEC has said we can do that. But the politicians or the lawmakers from some sectors or from sections, for some reason, have an issue with giving INEC this power in the law. And the main argument had been on coverage of internet coverage. A lot of them had said, we don't have internet. But you and I know that even when there's no place you don't have network coverage in Nigeria now. If one network doesn't work, the other would work. If you just take a broad assessment. If the commissioner says we can do this, then why should that be the argument from the point of lawmakers? If INEC, who is supposed to do the same, we can do this, just give us the power in the act. That's one angle. The second, why introduce NCC? I don't even understand why that became an argument, because NCC, for one, is not a commission created by the Constitution, for instance. If you look at it, if you go to the Constitution, the federal executive bodies are clear. NCC is not even one of it. So what's the attempt to introduce NCC as an authority that first would approve the decision of a body that is constitutional? In its sense, it's even a contradictory process, because you cannot claim to empower NCC to first assess the decisions of INEC when if you look at in the hierarchy of laws, the Constitution supersedes an act of Parliament, and INEC is a creation of the Constitution. So in its own, again, the whole conversation, it raises a lot of questions. It means either our lawmakers are not even appreciating the laws we have, the powers in the Constitution, and the fact that when we make laws, we need to ensure that our laws are consistent with our Constitution. We can't just review the Electoral Act because of political bias and interest, without asking ourselves, does this conflict with the Constitution, or is this in tandem with the provisions of the Constitution?
Yes, Cynthia, thank you. I mean, that was quite an elaborate opening from you there. That's where I want Barrister Jegede to come in here now. I think part of the reasons why the lawmakers are refusing to recognize that part of the Electoral Act, which gives INEC the full constitutional backing to transmit results electronically, is that you lawyers would have to battle that technically out in courts, right? Talk to me, sir, and tell me exactly how that the refusal of the National Assembly to recognize that part will affect or can affect litigations of election process in court.
Thank you.
Go on.
Like the other speaker rightly observed, one of the means that it might impact negatively by the time you go to court, and the lawyer at the other side, when you have challenged an election, and will come out with you that even the entire process of the INEC, so it's a way, a means to nullify any kind of contradictory results that has been transmitted via electronic fair electronic transmission, because the purpose of this thing, which we think is a good law, is that it makes an individual, it makes the litigant, anyone challenging an election, where election has been rigged, to be able to say, look, this is the computed result. We knew that most of the electoral fraud in Nigeria, it happens in compilation and transmission of results. In fact, some of the biggest electoral theft doesn't really even occur at the polling booths. It is when they claim they are transmitting those results. We have even had an election recently where a candidate that we can't mention right now, but it's a very popular case, somehow was to have been accused of collated his own result. And somehow that result found its way in and was pronounced as and was declared winner. So we are trying to have a situation. The purpose of this electoral transmission is that to have a consistent pattern by which election can be transmitted, and the other party, the litigant, the lawyer challenging any kind of a dubious electoral result, can rely on those data to challenge those results. But in circumstances where the Constitution has refused to give backing, or where there's no any statutory provision backing the electoral transmission, it makes that point so weak. It makes it so weak for you to rely on that when you are in the course of litigations.
So let me stay with you, Barrister, before I come to Cynthia. It therefore would mean that there's nothing wrong in INEC transmitting elections live from the polling booth, if I may, instead of having to go through the backlogs of copying and pasting on different pages until it gets to a collection center. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's the right thing to actually do so as to conduct credible and free elections.
Absolutely. This is it should be a common sense thing. But we know litigation is a very tough situation in Nigeria, especially the electoral litigations. In many of the modern countries, I'm not even sure they have in their law. When the election is being counted in America, we all watch it live from CNN. How the election has been transmitted, everybody's getting figure. Why should we even need that to be in our law in the first place? Because the INEC has power, so many power under the Constitution to conduct the election. They should be the one determining whether, we can conduct this election by virtue of the electronic process. And when you look at the section 160 of the Constitution, is a very strong provision of law. When you look at that section, that section is saying, look, the president can give rules, regulations to almost all other agencies in Nigeria, except INEC. The law of Nigeria today, the Constitution said that, look, the president cannot even impose on INEC the way they should do things. Talk less of, we have NCC. Who is NCC to the power given to INEC by the Constitution? To be telling INEC that this is where you can conduct election electronically, this is where you cannot. We believe that if that law is eventually passed the way it is, that law might be nullified. We cannot just, it might be challenged. It will definitely be challenged. Because the power of INEC has gone beyond where the NCC is not even an electoral umpire under the law.
Madam Yemi, good to have you. Enough is enough indeed for the elections, shenanigans, and madness in this country. What do you think we can do to get our politicians to just finally agree to be democratic in this country?
To be honest, there must be a cost. They must feel that being undemocratic has consequences and has a cost attached to it. But if they can be undemocratic and there's no cost and nothing happens, if I put it that way, then there's no incentive to change. You change bad behavior by giving it consequences.
And so you think that is what has been playing out all the while, for instance, the lawmakers have refused to recognize transmission of election results as a constitutional thing. I mean, like Mr. Jegede actually asked, why do we even need to, have that in the Constitution? I mean, what's the sense in that?
I do agree with you that there's no real sense in having to make it a law. You just basically, I mean, if you're running your office and you find out that using Excel is easier than using a manual ledger, You don't need to write a policy to say from this day forth, we of this organization shall hereby be using Excel. You just move to Excel and you continue your work because it's more efficient, it's faster, it's easier, and everybody gets on with it. But we found out that our politicians, as you've said, need the law to get them to do the right things, or in a sense, to constrain them to do the right things. Because otherwise, INEC should be able to just issue guidelines and so say, oh, okay, we've found out that this works better, this is what we're going to do. And everybody keeps it moving. But we realize that if it's not encoded as part of the law, then they find ways around it, or then they kick against it. A problem, because it's then one hurdle they have to jump over if it's in the law. Of course, they can go to court and challenge it as they do with everything, but at least it's better for those of us on the other side if there's actually an enabling law that allows us to hold them accountable.
I'm sure you monitored the elections that went on in Kaduna a few days ago. El-Rufai has recommended that electronic transmission should be, taken all over the country. Do you think our federal government would heed to that?
Heed to it because El-Rufai said it, or heed to it because what? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, yeah, El-Rufai, of course, is part of what I call the PAC. So maybe his voice would get them to say, okay, well, let's look at this again.
No, I mean, as with many of Malam's challenges, one of the things that you can't take away from him is the fact that he's quite progressive in some of these things. So it's not out of the ordinary that someone like him would say that. So it's not unexpected. But at the end of the day, though, it's either, because we also don't have a president who's progressive, it'll be a different matter if they send him the bill and he's like, oh, electronic transmission is not here, I'm not going to sign it. If that's the kind of president we had, then a lot of this grammar will not be necessary. But they'll put it in front of him, we'll put Biro to it, and then we'll be shouting because it will be too late. So therefore, before it gets in front of him, we need to stop the people at the National Assembly. So it's not a matter of who says what or whatever. But I mean, look at the sequence earlier in the year when it was found out that they were trying to smuggle in a manipulated version. I was trying to look for a stronger word, but let me keep with manipulated version. And when everybody started talking about it, they were automatically put on the back foot. And then you now started with what happened was, it didn't really happen like that, you see, and then the governors issued a statement, this person issued a statement. So there was a lot of outcry. So they were forced to step back. Now, in the midst of stepping back, they still managed to co-opt members of the NCC to come and lie under oath against the reports that NCC itself had issued. So you can see the desperation of how far they're willing to go. Now we have two separate versions. The House of Rep has a version, Senate has a version. I think it's the Senate version that's trying to make it under NCC for that. I mean, the levels of, the levels of thinking in their desperation to do these things shows you how far they're willing to go until they feel that there is something to lose or there is a cost to it. Imagine citizens started writing letters to their senators and saying, Madam, where were you on the day of this vote? Then you were finding out that somebody was at somebody's father's funeral. Somebody was now making excuses for why they were not at work, technically. And citizens or their constituents are then asking them, you were supposed to be in the Senate on this day when this important decision was going to be taken. Why were you missing at work? So when constituents are asking those who represent them these questions and they feel that they have to give account, their choices will be slightly different. There was different organizations did some naming and shaming around who voted yes, who voted no, who wasn't at work, citizens holding them accountable, citizens calling and asking questions. I mean, I don't know who it was that was complaining that his phone, I think it was the Senate president, that people were blowing up his phone. Yes, that's your job. If you don't do sensible things, people will blow up your phone. That's what's supposed to happen. So we need to blow up their phones a lot more, give them unrest, and so that when they make choices, they think, as in there's something at the back of their mind saying, my phone will be blown up, somebody will show up at my office, somebody will harass my wife, somebody will harass my child. So maybe their brains would be reset.
Okay. I think that phone blowing thing is part of Cynthia's responsibility. So let's get over to her now. 2023, Cynthia, is not so long away, you know. What is Yiaga Africa doing to help INEC deliver on credible elections to Nigerians?
The engagement with INEC. I know a lot of times, I think INEC is one institution that is called out the most. If you think about several government institutions that we have, is one of the institutions that is called out the most. And it's helping the commission also sit up. We need to continually engage INEC as we move to from Anambra, for instance. Now, INEC had released a statement and intimation that it would be deploying the bimodal voter accreditation system, BVAS. One of what it would do, it improves accreditation. Now we would have fingerprint and facial authentication, just so that the whole thing of biometric field, did not fail in smart card reader would be addressed now. The presentation makes it look like a perfect system, but you and I know that when it comes to engaging government institutions, no matter how beautiful it looks, until it is implemented, we will not know if it works. So, and I think what we can do now to help INEC is, INEC says they will try it out in Delta tomorrow. It's Soko South State Assembly by-elections. It will be tried out, tested tomorrow. Let us also follow that process so that the reports from there can inform reviews before Anambra, because INEC also plans to deploy this system in Anambra. And the new rule is no authentication, no vote. The kinds of support INEC needs now is objective criticism that provides, it highlights the problems, provides solution, and then also that can build confidence in the process, because we don't want to destroy the system. Rather, I want to build a system that people would be inspired to participate, because we want more people to turn out to vote in next elections. When we increase turnout, we will take away these kinds of people that make it into office. And that is our goal. Let people have confidence to show up, because if they show up, then we can challenge the outcome of elections, or rather overturn the outcome of elections. So those are the kinds of support that I think INEC requires now. But first, let us get the electoral amendment bill passed into law so we can have a document to engage and hold INEC accountable on with.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And in wrapping this up, because I think we have just 2 minutes or thereabouts to go, Yemi, I want to ask you, what are you doing? Enough is enough now, I mean, to really engage Nigerians. I know you're doing quite a few, but I want to ask, specifically as we get closer to 2023, what are you doing really to get more Nigerians, younger ones, to be interested in coming out to vote, like Cynthia just talked about?
Part of the challenge we've always have is when it gets to election day, people now start, or campaign time, people now start complaining when the candidates have already been chosen. I don't like this one. It's too tall, it's too short, it's too dark, it's too light. But by then, it's too late. The candidates are the candidates. So what we're trying to get young people especially is that clarity, because we're very good about saying what we don't want, and we're less as clear about saying what we do want. So that now we start having a conversation around the types of people we want to lead us. People who have compassion, people who have courage, who can make difficult decisions, people who have shown some track record, of capacity. What have you done before? Is it 100 cows or 10 cows, 20 cows? Did your cows grow over? Have you managed people? Have you managed resources? So show competence, show capacity, and show that you have the ability to lead and govern, because at the end of the day, governor, senator, House of Rep member, at any point in time, president, we are managing people and managing resources. So let's see your track record. So get young people and Nigerians generally to begin to articulate the type of person that you want to be your senator, to be your House of Rep member, to be your governor. And as we amplify those criteria and talk about the type of people we want, the idea is that political parties then realize that it is in their best interest to put these type of people forward if they want people to vote for them. Because if people are asking you that, what is your track record? Have you managed anybody? And you show that you've done nothing all your life, you are just being a politician, just really not doing anything. There's nothing to show that you've grown, you've added value in society. If it now comes to choose between candidate A and candidate B, and there's one that has shown that they've done something, shows courage, shows compassion, the idea is that it'll be easier, hopefully, for citizens to vote, not based on religion or ethnic affiliation, but based on people that can actually work. And so we begin to have these conversations. So we move away to the sentiments that tend to drive emotions when people vote, because we've realized that the fact that the person is from your area I mean, history from Obasanjo all the way to the current one from Katsina, there's nothing that shows that because you're from a particular place, it accrues benefit to where you come from. It doesn't. Katsina is one of the most insecure states in this country. And the president is a commander-in-chief, former military general from that state. So how has that helped your life? Then the fact that you are either Muslim or Christian or whatever, again, how has that helped your life? So hopefully we can have conversations about the type of people who can do Nigeria is in a critical stage. It's a long-term project to get us to roll back some of these things. The rates that people are leaving the country, doctors, professionals, there's a lot to do. So we must be clear about the type of people we elect into office if we want to get out of this.
Yemi, you've sounded much as an activist as you are, but let me ask you, Barrister, at the end of the day, INEC will go ahead to transmit results electronically, whether NCC likes it or not, and whether the National Assembly approves them to do that or not, right?
Maybe, because I think they have done something similar before. There are a lot of electronic gadgets being used by the INEC. But what we are saying is that if it is not contained in the law, like the Electoral Act they are trying to amend, if that law forbids them transmitting an election, what that simply implies is that the litigant, especially the petitioner in electoral disputes, might not be able to rely on those evidence. Only that, I think those things are contained in this Electoral Act. If you can have that evidence that the results were transmitted and you were the clear winner by the virtue of that result transmission, it's a strong ground for you to be victorious in that electoral dispute. But if it's not contained there, INEC might still go ahead, but that will be left for court to decide. It's going to be seriously challenged. And the other party, the petitioner, they've been always losing elections so much in the country. Almost every year when this kind of thing happens, the 95% of petitioners ended up losing, even when they have strong cases. And this is what could have strengthened their cases. And this is expected to also reduce the cheating and everything. But if it's not there right now, INEC can still go ahead somewhere. I think they still have the power to go ahead with some of these things by virtue of the power conferred on them by the Constitution and the Electoral Act. They can deploy all these things, even if it's not written per se, because that is not the only means they are using for that transmission. There's also collation of the hard copies per se. There's kind of a manual collation as well, transmission as well. So you cannot come around and say the election is null and void. That one just should have been like a backup evidence. But if it's not there now, it's only weakening the case of the challenger, the petitioner, and to me, it just make the rigging to continue some way. That's it.
Well, our job in the media is to keep the conversations going and to educate Nigerians on what they need to know, so that at the end of the day, we will be proud of any person elected into any office in this country. I must very much say a big thank you to you, Barrister Jegede, and to you, Cynthia Mbamalu and Yemi Adamolekun. Three of you have given me much food on the table. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Have a lovely day.
You too.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye. Good to see you, Cynthia. Bye.
Yeah, Cynthia. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.